I mean, the very honest truth is it didn't occur to me until fairly recently. I guess around 20, maybe it's because I have children. That might have been it. Because used to, in the last couple of years I've stopped because they don't want to hear it anymore, but my children have gotten too old. But they used to love hearing my childhood stories. And I always felt it was important to be very honest with them in the story, not to embellish Dad into like a heroic figure or a do-gooder. I told them when I was a failure or a chump, dishonest, whatever. And that ended about 2 years ago. And I also brought them back to my old house where I grew up, and I showed them around the neighborhood and stuff. And I don't know, maybe part of that is what fed into the time to make the film, and to give it everything that I had.
Oh, wow.
My brother and I, what we did was, I called my brother and I said, Ed, can you write down Marianne Trump's speech as best you can remember it? And I'll do the same, and we'll compare it. Because there was no transcript anywhere. So he wrote up what he remembered, I wrote up what I remembered, and it was really similar. So it must be pretty close to what she said. And I just tried to reproduce it as faithfully as I could.
Well, there's always a responsibility.
Yeah.
Even, whoever you play, you have such a responsibility to your director, and I always try to be very sensitive in the way that I communicate with my director. And there was another layer to this one because my questions about my character were also questions about his mother, and it felt, they're very personal questions, and so, but I actually found that the restraint that I felt within myself of how I wanted to ask the questions, my questions took on an almost poetic quality because I was asking him to describe memories and the senses of the memories. And so I would say it was very respectful, sensitive, loving, full of trust. And I don't really have, it's hard to put into words, but I hope to work with him again. Preferably, I do though. Anyway, doesn't matter. It was great.
Probably the most daunting thing I've ever done or taken on.
Really?
Because of how I feel about James as a filmmaker and because of what you're talking about. I mean, Annie's right. It's always a responsibility. I always feel a sort of huge measure of dread going into anything, just not knowing if the rain will come, But this, the challenge in a way, was to be as specific and authentic to who these people were. And at the same time, you can't play someone else's version of a character or someone else's ideas or feelings or memories of a character. You have to own it. And I think at the end of the day, all we have as actors, all I have as an actor is my instincts. And so there's a point where we had to take it from James and make it our own, and he allowed us to do that and set us free. But there was a tremendous amount of sort of, kind of forensic detective work to do. James was not interested in portraiture of his parents or in some kind of documentary reality version of his parents. He was after something, I think, more poetical, and almost mythic. And I find that there's a mythic quality to this film. Although it is about these people in this time, in this place, there's something that looms very large about these. They could as well be called mother, father, in a way.
Yeah.
That was all true too. The Reagan, everyone cheering that and stuff. Like if you were a Carter person or a John Anderson person, you were like a complete loser.
Right, I remember that.
Yeah, a total outcast loser at that school. The thing about, I wanted a very, great actor to play Marianne Trump because when she showed up, it was like an awesome figure that, she was there at the school and had great power. And you were scared of her. So I didn't want to cast someone that you didn't know or anything. Because I wanted the reaction to be the same as I had it, which was like, who's this person of power? Bang! Her. She's up there, she's telling me, you're not going to get into good college. You won't. Unless you listen to me. Like all this kind of power that person had to a 12-year-old. And I wanted to give that sort of a sensation to the audience.
You're great. I'm going to ask, probably room for one more question. Banks,
Yeah.
finding him. Why was he the right guy to play you?
I looked at maybe 400 kids. There were many who were very talented. There were beautiful actors. And Banks broke my heart. You know, Banks was someone I saw that could be obnoxious, and you still loved him. And I mean, he had an intelligence and a sensitivity, and when I met him on the Zoom, I thought, this is a great kid, and I think he could pull it off. Now, having said that, there's a lot of talent out there. So it's about how it matches up with the personality that you want in the film. It's not only like he's the best actor. It doesn't mean anything best, you know. Marlon Brando couldn't dance like Fred Astaire, you know what I mean? Not everybody has the same talent set. But I just saw something in him that broke my heart.
Well, I will say that after one of my first scenes to do was the scene with Banks in the stairwell.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew what I wanted to do in the scene, and I didn't want to do it without telling Banks first, and so I got his permission and talked to his mother about it and made sure she knew what I felt the scene required. And we all were in agreement, and Banks was very clear that he's like, bring it. I've worked with actors before who have brought it, and I like working that way. And I said, okay. And so we did the scene, which does get physical. And when it was finished, and without being indiscreet, I can't tell you how many crew members came up to me and said, oh my God, that was my mother.
Yeah.
And one person said it best, they said, that's some old school mothering.
Yeah.
And it's not without love, but it creates, I believe, a traumatic effect later on in life.
Yeah.
Potentially in the moment as well, but I'm not an expert about it. I shouldn't even be talking about such things. But knowing that there is so much love and emotion and fear built up in that response, and not judging it, but just understanding it, that was more what I focused on, as opposed to comparing how I parent my children now to how people did it in the past. People did the best they could, truly. In so many instances in the world, however short of the ideal it fell, a lot of times people were doing the best they knew how.
Somebody came up to me after the screening last night, someone who's a luminary in our business, and said, you know, I think a lot of people of my generation are going to recognize their parents in this and their fathers, and I saw my father in this, and he did that to me and worse, and my kids would have a very hard time understanding how much he loved me. And I think, you know, Annie was talking about loving contradictions in characters, and I think that is so evident in this family and in these characters, because while there is cruelty and brutality, in a way it's sort of like a stray dog, a wounded dog, who if you get too close to them or try to show them affection, they only know how to lash out. And so this, as a parent, this character is just sort of not equipped with what we recognize as a healthy expression of love, or healthy forms of parenting. But there is tremendous affection, as well as cruelty, as well as, you know, just all of it is in there.
So one of the first things you realize when you meet James Gray is that he's a true cinephile. And I realized that for him, cinema is a love language, and that he spoke it much better than I did. And so the thing about James is I started to watch interviews that he gave about the types of movies that he loved and why he loved them, because he's so articulate about cinema. It's really one of the pleasures of this film festival for me has been getting him to speak about his love for film to an audience that shares that love. And I saw an interview that he gave, and he talked about Raging Bull, and how he saw Raging Bull, and he and his brother were cracking up when they saw it, because they saw their street. They saw their world up on screen and what that meant for him. And he talked about how Martin Scorsese said, I wanted to portray characters who were emotionally inarticulate. And that framed our movie for me in such a significant way, and in a way that moved me. And I thought, when people don't have the words, what do they do? Well, a lot of, we have young children. You see it when children don't have words, they get incredibly angry. And so that was an aspect of the film as well, was showing that when we look to the past, we see moments where we didn't have the words, we didn't have the consciousness, we didn't have the understanding, but we had the feeling. We had the feeling and the passion of love, but none of the tools yet.